Power 98.7. Now we're talking.
My name is Sam Sitole. I used to live in Zevenfontein, that used to be called then, but currently now is Steyn City.
A few days after those graves were our title deeds was published in April 2018, I and the Ngoma family went on Iman Rapeti's breakfast show on Power FM to discuss the story. I went with Mphoso Ngoma, our main character from the last episode, and his two nephews, Jacob Ngoma and Sam Sitole. The grave story was really well received, and in the weeks after it was published, I was invited on a few radio and TV shows to talk about it. The interviews were usually quite cursory, over in about 15 minutes after a quick summary of the story and about 3 or 4 follow-up questions. Iman Rapeti's show was different. She held so much space and time to really get into the issue, and for every guest to really tell their story and express their pain, which she generously affirmed. The conversation ended up being about an hour long. At the beginning, we each introduced ourselves and talked about our connection to the story.
When I was born in 1969, I grew up there until possibly when I was on grade 6, when we were forcibly removed. No, it was a normal daily life, and because we used to live, you'll get the Mahlangu family, where my mother is from, and my uncle's house was here, my bigger uncle's house was here, and all houses were situated together, and then you'll get the Sitole up there, and the Sikosanas up there, the Ngomas that side, and it used to be like the entire community. When we have functions, we'll get together, and it was like that. I still remember vividly when the trucks came. I was from school, and the white GT trucks came and pick everybody out. You'll be moved to a new area where you don't know, and where you get there, you still need to erect a shack and so forth with my grandmother. And my mother was at work at the same time, my uncles were at work. So it was a chilling story. So we moved to Mpumalanga, and it was so tough.
In the 5 years that I've known Sam, even as recently as this year, he's never been able to talk about what happened. The removal, the loss of the graves, the failed negotiation, without choking back tears. Then other callers with a connection to the story called in. I remember it felt like a collective moment of remembering, expression, dare I say even healing.
Lawrence, go ahead.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
You know what? I'm listening to this story, and all I could remember was my dad coming home in tears, and the only name he could mention was Lucky. And that's all I have to say. My dad died a very premature death, and he fought for those graves. And the only thing that he could remember, he came to me and said, Lawrence, sis, ngicela le ndaba yamathunzi uzofela into ongayazi mntanami. And that's all I have to say. The only name he ever said to me was Lucky.
Lawrence, I'm so sorry to hear you so cut up like this. It just makes me feel incredibly sad. Lala in Roodepoort. Good morning, Lala.
Hi, how are you, Iman?
I'm so sad listening to these stories. Go ahead.
Hey, I'm sad as well. Eh? I know the relative of the old man there. They used to attend school with my brothers, but I've got a similar story as well at Jacob Creek Estate. They've bulldozed our relative graves there. And and right now we can't, we don't even have the access to go to the grave right now. We will appreciate it if we get some help from that panel there.
For every story that we talk about in places like Dainfern or the former Zevenfontein, are hundreds of stories, similar stories across our country, and it just actually makes me feel sick.
Iman was right. In the weeks and months after the story came out, I was inundated with calls, emails, messages from people who had either lost graves on Zevenfontein, been evicted from Zevenfontein, or experienced something similar in the area. 5 years later, to this day, I still get WhatsApps and messages from people who'd like my help. We ended the conversation with a phone call from Lucky. Again, Iman was generous in giving him a platform to speak, but quite firm in her line of questioning.
I was born and bred in the Zevenfontein farm, exactly where Steyn City is right now. Yeah? And over the years, I grew up there. And when this strategy happens, in fact, I was a farm boy there. I was there. I saw it when those situations were happening by then, the AFBOP company. Yeah? And over the years, this was haunting me when I was still a schoolboy in the same area again. And basically, I am the one who started when I grew up after I went to the undertaker business and say that we need to get to understand what happened to our forefathers, to our ancestors. I'm the one who started the initiative. And basically, what I did is that I called upon the elders in the areas, Babungoma being one of them, and the other members, Matlangus. There's quite a number of them. I then did a committee that was a working committee and called them because these graves were...
Lucky was long-winded and confusing. He spoke in circles and added a lot of details.
Including my family remains were buried as paupers in the 8th grade.
Lucky, I want you, if you don't mind, if I can just pause you there for a second, because we're limited for time, but also to bring it sort of to the future, to bring it to now. There's some dispute about whether money was paid out. So
but to summarize, Lucky continued to insist on his innocence and that everything was done above board. If you'd like to hear the details of the allegations against him and how he defended himself, you can listen to that in episode 8.
When did that happen, and how much money are we talking about, Lucky? How much were you paid?
In an estimate of 1.2, 1.4 million. A grave would give 1,500 for only, that was not buying the graves, for only ceremonies.
They're shaking their heads, Lucky. They're shaking their heads in the studio.
It's fine, man.
I knew how long the Ngomas and others connected to the story had wanted to confront Lucky about everything that went down. They said he'd become difficult to track down or contact and disappeared in the years since the incident. I'm glad that the radio show gave them that opportunity, but from what I remember, it wasn't as satisfying an encounter as I'd imagined it would be. Lucky was so evasive, and his answers didn't really shed light on what happened, nor on a way forward. Back then, when I was just starting out as an investigative journalist, I remember believing that that was the purpose of my work. To bring about accountability, consequences, dig up answers that change people's lives materially for the better. I think that the platform Iman gave us, the listening ear, the space to process what had happened and put the story on public record is often the best that we journalists can do, at least in the immediate sense. Because once you tell a story, it does take on a life of its own, a timeline of its own. And there's no knowing what seeds it will plant and what journey it will take. You don't know where it will go, who will retell it, and what long-term shifts, no matter how small, it can bring about. Like this caller on Iman's show, who called in with the story that I'm going to tell you about on this episode.
28 after 10. Peter, you're in Deep Slurt. Good morning.
Morning, how are you, Dr. Imanda Petty?
Yeah, sad. Go ahead, Peter.
You know, there was a granny who used to live there. I'm not talking about the olden years. I'm talking about 94, 95, and 96. They forcefully removed her from that area where there is auto and general as we are speaking. And we were told that among other people, Nelson Mandela's got a piece of land in Steyn City. And the guy, the kingpin is the guy by the name of Lucky Musiman. That guy needs to be called to the book and explain. And he was paid a lot of money, millions and millions. That is the guy by the name of Lucky Musiman. And they forcefully, they humiliated the granny by the name of Mahlangu. They put her on the street. But today, you pass there, you find out in general, they've built a house. She don't have a house. The family, they are going to be poor for the rest of their lives. But they're like people who are making billions and billions out of her land.
If the Dainfern story is about digging up the bones of a buried apartheid history, then the Steyn City story is about how that history haunts and lives with us to this day, and how that history maintains justice as an elusive concept for so many. Welcome to Golden City. I'm your host, Zanele MG, and I love a good story. This podcast is a collection of the greatest stories I've ever heard about the city of gold, Johannesburg, South Africa. In each episode, you'll meet a different Joburger who will tell you their own true stories in their own words. All the ups and downs, adventures, lessons, wins and losses that make life in Joburg truly interesting. This concrete jungle may not have mountains or beaches to compete with the natural beauty of other South African cities, but the diverse and amazing people who call Johannesburg home make this golden city shine bright. What a story. How do you feel about that? Tell me more. The Dainfern Golf Estate opened in 1992, and 10 years later, when they were approached by Lucky Moshimane and the Zeverfontein families looking for their graves, that was not the only local group presenting as a thorn in the side of the developers and the homeowners association. As we covered last time, Dainfern had been developed on a portion of the sprawling Zeverfontein farm. Another portion of the farm, right next door to Dainfern's boundary wall, was called River Glen. River Glen was owned by another private company that had not yet made use of the land. You see, the problem that annoyed Dainfern so much was one that they had helped to create. The evictions that took place in the 80s to make way for the golf estate had been the beginning of a wave of evictions around the area as farms were sold to private property developers. The problem of evictions was so massive that 2 informal settlements had popped up within a 5-kilometer radius in the area. One was on another old farm called Deep Sloot, and the other was right outside Dainfern's boundary wall on River Glen. The displaced people who built homes on River Glen were joined by others who had come to the area for work but could not afford formal housing. And pretty soon, a sizable informal settlement popped up. There were about 20,000 people, 7,000 households in the informal settlement known as Zeverfontein Township, or also called Los Macheri, which in Afrikaans means leave my girlfriend alone. I have no idea where that name came from. But what I do know is that their wealthy neighbors were not crazy about the presence of taxis, shacks, and shebeens so close to their pristine golf course. The developer who owned the land on River Glen was not happy either. On River Glen, there were 2 groups of occupiers. One was the Los Macheri informal settlement and all of the households there, and the second was a group that had been there much longer. They were the original farm dwellers and their descendants, the black people who had lived and worked on the farm as labor tenants during apartheid when they were denied all land-owning rights of their own. This group was known as the Esther occupiers because of the Esther Law, or Extension of Security of Tenure Act, that was supposed to protect their rights. Legal proceedings to relocate them were different and had to happen separately to relocating the other Zeverfontein occupiers. Amongst other things, Esther law protects people who were living on someone else's land when the law was passed in 1997 and grants them special rights of occupation. Esther also allows people to maintain and visit their family graves on someone else's land within reasonable consideration of the landowner's privacy. Long-term occupiers, those who are over 60 years old or who have occupied the place for more than 10 years, were given special rights to stay on the land for the rest of their lives. One of the Esther occupiers was a woman named Leti Ngoma, known in the community as Gogo Ngoma. She had lived in a small mud house on the banks of the Yokskei River for 62 years since she got married in 1951. Gokongoma had survived 2 decades of evictions, during which most of her extended family was broken up and moved far away. This included Sam and his grandmother, who were once her neighbors before they were removed in the 80s. Over the decades, Gokongoma's home became the place that Amandebele returned to for family and cultural gatherings. Certain spiritual practices could only be carried out on the land that their ancestors once walked. Her home that had remained on Zevenfontein was the family's last tie to generations of history there. If Gokongoma was removed from her home, that would mean Amandebele were finally wiped out from the area completely. So when she was served with an eviction notice by the new landowner in 1996, she initially followed legal advice not to move. At least this time around, unlike with Dainfern, there were democratic laws and systems in place to help them fight for their place on Zevenfontein. The land claims process was sputtering along. Laws like Esther gave them hope. So the family resolved to fight. If Amandebele could help it, Gokongoma was going nowhere. By about 2004, Sam, who was evicted from Zevenfontein as a schoolboy in 1985, had returned to Dainfern to work as a golf caddy. That was when he reunited with Lucky Moshimane, who he knew when they were both boys growing up on farms in the area. Lucky, known then as the Deep Sloot millionaire, had become very powerful, wealthy, and politically connected in both Deep Sloot and Zevenfontein. He'd gotten his start in ANC youth politics and in 1996 was elected chair of the Deep Sloot branch. Lucky's business interests in the township also flourished. Whenever we hear from Lucky in this episode, it's going to be excerpts from a long interview that I did with him back in January 2018 when I was investigating the grave story.
At the stage I was riding, some of my family were in Zevenfontein, but I was riding in Deep Sloot. So I was this side and this side. Remember, I had a tavern in Zevenfontein, a tavern in Deep Sloot, and then my family was in Zevenfontein, so I'm in Deep Sloot. Okay. So I was still active, very active in Zevenfontein because I was chairperson of the branch, which was the same branch, and we were the same community. When there was problems, they used to come and ask me. They used to come to me. And I would sort out the problems.
Some of those problems included taxi and political violence. The first few years of democracy for South Africa were a very unstable time, marked by violent clashes between supporters of rival political parties. Lucky founded an anti-crime vigilante unit in Deep Sloot, which he described as the business and community shield that offered guarding services at very affordable tariffs. His first foray into the private security industry. As a political figure and activist, he was known for organizing marches. He and his supporters marched against the violence in the area, and he also organized a march for Deep Sloot to be officially recognized as a township rather than just a squatter camp or informal settlement. Lucky had shrewd business interests, and noticing the changes happening around him in 4 ways, he saw a need to register 2 more businesses, a funeral parlor and a construction company.
If you look at my construction company, it was longer than when it was registered. It was longer before Steyn City.
Okay.
So I had a mortuary, then I had a security, then I have a construction company. Because I was seeing that the north was developing. And how do we then go to gaining? So clearly up until where? So I said, let me go register.
The changes that Lucky was noticing was the post-apartheid white flight from the Johannesburg CBD and the residential areas closest to it. As white and moneyed Joburgers fled further north, developers lured them to gated estates with the promise of safety and a luxury lifestyle far removed from the uncertainty and crime of the Joburg streets outside of the boom gates. For a long time, Dainfern was considered the most, if not among the most, luxurious and aspirational of them all. But the development that was being planned for River Glen next door, Steyn City, would blow Dainfern and other exclusive estates totally out of the water. The brainchild of a multi-billionaire Do Steyn and his best friend Giuseppe Plumari, Steyn City is a city within Joburg City. It's 6 times the size of Sandton, 4 times the size of Monaco, and 3 times the size of Central Park in New York. The places that marketers of Steyn City chose to compare the development to, New York, Monaco, lets you know the kind of market that they were aiming at. Homes in the ultra-luxury development go for an average of 3 to 10 million rand, and facilities for residents include a gym, a clubhouse, a spa, an equestrian center, off-road biking tracks, and an 18-hole golf course designed by golfing legend Jack Nicklaus. But before they could break ground on Steyn City, they not only needed to remove the people living there, but they also needed to remove their graves. Lucky's reputation as an activist and his business interests aligned perfectly. He approached the Zevenfontein grave-owning families and offered to help them negotiate for their graves and their land rights against Steyn City's developers. He also approached Steyn City's developers and offered for Tsugo funeral services to not only remove the graves from the land, but also do so in a way that was culturally sensitive and in line with the family's wishes. Another one from the archives. Back in 2018, I'd gone with Sam to Four Ways Memorial Park Cemetery to visit some of the graves that Lucky had relocated. There, he told me what he remembered about how things had gone down with Dainfern and then Steyn City.
As we started at Dainfern and we moved towards, as we go along,
at the
Steyn
same
City
time.
comes up.
Yes.
Yes. So now we're fighting the land. At first we're fighting for graves that were in Dainfern. And then, whereas we're living in Steyn City, but some of our graves were in Dainfern. Mm-hmm. So we would move with the whole thing. The question. Once we got graves, and then we will definitely have the land back. We would be paid. We would be rich. That's what, when you're talking about being rich, people as poor we are, and you find yourself, you'll be amazed. I remember in a couple of meetings that we had with Lucky, behind closed doors, that
Without the rest of the families.
without, but as a committee,
Yes.
guys, we can have an opportunity either to be paid for our land or either to get something from this, either the land back and so forth.
And so, how did you come to start to talk to Dainfern? How did the whole issue, how did you join the steering committee?
I remember when there's a meeting called a meeting in 4 Ways in Witkoppen School about the land. Obviously, the message will be sent out, will attend, and you'll be appointed in terms of how do you question things.
Oh, so you sort of took leadership by the way you
Yes.
spoke at
Yes,
meetings.
when you ask them question, how can we do this, and we were brought into that committee.
So the belief when the community was meeting at Witkoppen, what would they think they were meeting for?
Actually, Lucky was twisting things now and then. He will check the move and then he will twist it. You will believe that we are on the right track. We might get possibly about 20 million rand, something similar to that. And then when you remember, when you talk about money, the whole community start to focus, and they will send more people to come and to attend and to call each other. Everybody believed in him.
Because
Because the influence that he proved and the promises that he made, and the possibly the luxury that he had at the time. He had a security company. He had this. He was one of those guys that you'll be proud of that came out of 4 Ways.
Lucky was also one of the few men from their background, their community, who dared to approach rich and powerful men like Steyn and Giuseppe Plumari.
I'm the one who looked for the numbers of Giuseppe. I called Giuseppe. I remember he was very, very hard on me. On who are you? Who you think you are? So I then coming down and say, sir, you better meet with me. Let's meet. Then there was negotiations between the families of the graves with Giuseppe. Each and everything that we're doing, I would involve.
Where are the graves, sorry, that you moved from Steyn City? Where are they?
They're still in as well.
Always
as well. Yes, ma'am. So they are also there.
They're in the same plot as
Yes.
the Dainfern
No.
as the Mamelodi
They're different.
graves.
There's demarcation.
Okay.
You wouldn't know it, but I can show you.
Okay.
There's a demarcation of this side and this side. Yeah?
Okay, so
But-
you
but
moved
most
all of the graves of
yeah,
Steyn City.
but most of those graves, because they belong to different families, they were moved all over. Some were moved in Mabupani, because they were already located, but we want our graves in Mabupani. We want our graves because our remains Kokaikai, you know? Kwahafontein, Mabupani, and all that. They were moved all over.
Okay.
They were in Steyn City.
So Steyn City paid for all of those
Steyn
remains
City
to go
pays for all
to
of those
everywhere they
remains.
had to go.
Exactly.
All right. So yeah.
So basically, UGCP then we grow a relationship now.
Yes.
And then relationship whereby he wouldn't touch the people. Every meeting that was happening on site in Zeefontein was happening on my office with the leadership, with government. So I committed because I don't want him to get to a point whereby he beats the people. Because once I can leave, what will be
Lucky really talks up what an influence he had over Giuseppe to keep him from evicting people from Riverglen. But the truth is that there were other complicating factors that may have also steadied Giuseppe's hand. Steyn City was a massive project, one that would have never been possible without the buy-in and cooperation of local and national government departments that had to provide roads, water pipelines, electricity, and gas lines, infrastructure that actually supported the residents of Steyn City. And the city of Joburg was also responsible for meeting the housing needs of South African citizens and residents who were living on Riverglen. If Giuseppe was to evict them en masse, that would have created a massive problem for local government to solve. News reports at the time quoted Giuseppe as saying that his company had contributed 5.5 billion rand toward developing local infrastructure. In the interests of such an expensive collaboration, it was best for Steyn City not to create other expensive problems for government to solve. And so, while the eviction process continued to drag out in court, there became this other parallel process where the developers, the city, and representatives of the Zeefontein community tried to negotiate over a suitable solution for the land. In the meantime, Los Macheri continued to grow and spread, and Lucky spotted another business opportunity.
So Giuseppe first puts up a wall to secure no more squatters arriving.
Then I'm the one who advised to say, Giuseppe,
Yes.
let's first put up a wall.
Put up a
Remember,
wall.
he put a parasite fencing first.
Yeah.
It did not work because the people stole it, because there were already squatters in there. Then lately he says, Lucky, I think of putting up a wall. And we said, okay, let's put up a wall. Then we tendered. I want the tender. That's why they were saying maybe now was captured. Because
I think that is
the
the wall has become
Yes.
a symbol of
Yes.
when Lucky turned on us. You know, that's what they're
No,
saying
no.
is that he was an activist and then he got money, millions, 25 million for this wall, and then he got captured.
No. And let me also mention this one. It's very important, Alexander. I did not do that all alone. Because Giuseppe recognized what I do not have the experience. He said, hey, like, you don't have experience. You might build this wall, and then tomorrow, it's all about. So he put engineers of guys from his office. He put a project manager on that and said, you appoint the subcontractors. And I appointed people in the ground, you know, we're all benefiting. Some of the local guys, they worked in there, in that wall. It was a big wall. I wouldn't have taken the 25 million. So people have considered that the whole 25 million came to me. You see, that's the concept. Because in the 25 million that the wall was built in, there was engineers, there was steel. That wall is big. there was concrete that was coming with the trucks. That was also paid in there. So what he did, Giuseppe said, this is an account, that 25 million is here for Afri-Eagle. But whenever we want money, said, what do you want? Bricks, he pays for the bricks from that. He pays for what from that? The engineers, the steel, not like.
But were you not compromised? Because on this side, you're doing business with Giuseppe. On this side, you're negotiating for the people who are being relocated. Do you see why people would say that you are now compromised? Because you're in between both.
They would say that.
You can't be tough on Giuseppe because he's paying you money. He's giving you a check for work you're doing for him.
We do friends when we friends with Giuseppe. When coming to our people, when coming to the people, when coming to representing the people, so Giuseppe. It's another platform to deal with. I don't care whether you give me business or not.
Lucky insists that throughout, he was pressuring Giuseppe to do right by Gogo Ngoma.
Gogo, I was there. I was very close to Gogo. Most of the pictures that you see, I'm with Gogo. I didn't want anything because Gogo Farah no mama, Farah no Gogo, you know. And she was very close. You wouldn't touch that Gogo like any Gogo. And then I remember I took Giuseppe to Gogo. Some landa, which is what Giuseppe go there to old lady. Why come on, Gogo Funani? Can I organize a house for you? Giuseppe put like him. What do you want with the Gogo? With training Gogo in Cosmos City was in place. Now. In Rugupin, not the RDP.
Yes, Gogo should lose a life for RDP.
Ufuna Gogo in Rugupin, Nalekuma Pond. Giuseppe said, how much is the house? The house was 500 and something thousand, I remember. But Giuseppe come on, paying out 10. And I'm saying to them, let's have a mutual understanding. Where I'm getting this thing to now to be sealed, I think Namafa, it was offering 560,000 or something.
Oh,
it was,
Giuseppe,
yes.
paying iPhone.
But bang a phone.
But
they were for 3 million, 4 million. I remember, millions.
For you.
For a mad house. I still have the pictures if you don't have. Now somebody see a money making scheme. You see now where this thing now gets to be sour. Now Ukoko, confused. Ukoko lucky. Greed came into place. These kids now they got advice to say they want to make millions. The kids are taxi owners.
Yeah.
They want to make money from Ukoko so that they can pursue the taxi industry and buy more of quantums. And then I got an opportunity to meet Madiba in the interim. And then meeting Madiba, I remember, he called me. And then because Steyn now had the land, and Steyn said, this young man who's making noise here. And then Madiba said, call him. And I went to Dada, a citizen, on a one-on-one. He said, I don't want anybody else. I want you alone. I remember that day. I was very scared. But I went for the first time. I met Dada, and Dada says, my friend's got a problem here. I've come a long way with this man like Steyn, and then he's been helping the organization very much. What's your name? He asked me, I tell him, oh, Mushiman, okay. What is the issue? I told you that. One thing that Tata said that day, I remember. He said to Steyn, but why don't you give them what belongs to them? Steyn, why don't you guys do what like he says? He says here is the document, the graves were here, there's still graves here. He says to you, there are people living in the land to stay, and you just your land you're saying, can't you come up with a third that people must be done? That's how now Cosmos City was born after that. That's how Cosmos City came.
The absolute origin of Cosmos City, was people from Zevenfontein.
Exactly. It was then when Tata says, these people to stay, you move them. I remember the private meeting. We said, you need to move. That's me, Giuseppe, Steyn, his PA, and we're about 6, I remember. You know? I think Paul was there. Paul Marshall, I think was there. So basically, and say, but he says, you're saying this guy is causing trouble all over there. But he's causing trouble because he's representing people. Why can't you guys facilitate the people to go there?
Madiba came up a lot when I was investigating this story.
Among other people, Nelson Mandela's got a piece of land in Steyn City. And the guy, the kingpin, is the guy by the name of Lucky Musiman.
Joe Steyn and Nelson Mandela were not only friends, they were also roommates from time to time. In fact, when Nelson Mandela was released from his 27-year prison sentence on Robben Island in 1990, he went to go stay at Joe Steyn's home in the Joburg suburb of Sandhurst. Mandela spent 6 months there, editing his autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom. The Financial Times reports that Mandela also drafted South Africa's interim constitution there. In 1992, Mandela moved back in with the Steyns after divorcing his second wife, Winnie Mandela. In her book, Good Morning, Mr. President, Madiba's former assistant, Zelda Lagrange, writes that Joe Steyn built a house on his game farm, Shambhala, for Mandela and his third wife, Graça Machel, to treat as a holiday home of their own. Nelson Mandela also visited Steyn City, to the disgust of the Zeefontein occupiers. In a newspaper article titled, Madiba Caught Up in Exploitation Spat, Zeefontein residents showed a picture of Mandela visiting the site to the journalists who wrote the story and told them that Madiba was allowing himself to be used and exploited by the developers. While I could not confirm whether this meeting with Madiba ever in fact took place, I do know that Cosmo City was developed as government's solution to the housing crisis in 4 ways.
So there was 4,500 RDPs in Cosmo.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
No, there were 5,000.
5,000
Yes.
RDPs in Cosmo.
Yes, also.
And those, who were those set aside for? How were those allocated? What was the process?
This is Suzette. They would come on the city of Joburg, had I remember one of those, I was talking to him today. Maybe we should give him an interview as well. The city had an office. They would come and do what they call a C form and record everyone and go put him in a database. Yeah? And after putting him in the database, and they will check who qualifies, who doesn't qualify.
Cosmo City was designed as a mixed-income residential suburb that included 5,000 RDP houses that would be allocated to occupiers on Zeefontein who qualified. Free social housing in Joburg falls under the national government's Reconstruction and Development Program and is administered by the National Department of Human Settlements. Qualifying South Africans who apply for an RDP house are added to either a provincial or a national database. And as each 2-bedroom house with a kitchen and a living room becomes available, they are distributed according to those lists. The RDP distribution program has been mired with problems, a lot of them caused by corruption. There's huge backlogs, long waiting lists, and a lot of the houses are often very poorly built by contractors. Those who are on the RDP waiting list are susceptible to be targeted by scammers, either criminals or officials working for the housing department themselves. There's also an illicit black market of RDP houses being bought and sold and people paying to jump the queue. Between 2001 and 2010, the time frame of this story, there were about 310,000 people in Gauteng on the waiting list for an RDP house. Today, that number is estimated to sit at about 1.2 million. In case it's not clear, it's illegal for a private citizen to have any sort of input or influence over the RDP distribution process.
Some of the members, I can go there now, some of the kids of the Esters, I fought for them to get houses. Los Mecheri, but when is these are free houses. When is but when I'm remember now, that was a different issue. So you as an Esther, you'll get your place, you'll get people paid, whatever you have been paid, or whatever it's but now. So,
Abangene na 5,000. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I think it was about 250. I pushed the city to take out 250 houses for the Esters, even those who were not even living anymore in the Zeefontein. But because they were used to live there for many years, they were born there. But she told no because I was living there. Zola was trying. Sophie. Because they were Esters, they got a priority to say, "I must benefit." Through GCP is all fighting. Give these kids homes. People keep only taking the elders. What about their children? What about their grandchildren? Because what could now? So they must get there. So one house will able to get 3 houses study at the peak of Cosmo City. Then the mom of the Esther is left behind.
When Lucky showed up to what was my office back then for this interview, he was flanked by an entourage of about 3 people. One of the men he introduced as his lawyer. Listening back now, I realized that there was a moment that Lucky's lawyer had to intervene to keep Lucky from really incriminating himself.
Was there no list of people who were qualifying for those houses? Like preference given to those who applied before others?
You know what happened at the Machakane? When we were living in there, just after 1994, there was a company that was appointed, which came and put barcodes in every check. They barcoded each and every check. I was part of the panel working with them. They barcoded. After that, they took the barcode, they entered in the system.
Lucky's security company, Jumbo Security, was contracted to carry out the evictions and relocations. And Lucky, in turn, subcontracted some of the community members that were being evicted to use their own trucks to relocate themselves and their neighbors.
And then the government did not have people to relocate people in there.
Jumbo.
He wrong happy. Like he's making money again.
Exactly.
But Jumbo, here now, Jumbo, but here now was an very interesting part of it. Like you had the truck, to relocate about. Whose trucks was doing the job? The community trucks. I got pictures of them. The community trucks was doing the job.
Oh, you hired your trucks. You
From
subcontracted.
the community. Because I didn't have the trucks.
From the same community that you're relocating.
Yes. With their bikes again. It's their own thingy. Let them help. And then we're paying them for their trucks to relocate. Again, the community. We're building the sheds on the other side. Everyone benefit there. Outside, everyone, people bought bikes there. There's a guy can bring you Lucas. I created entrepreneurs there. Everyone benefited. Everyone. I'm one person that it's not the one man show. And when I got an idea, I said, let's eat together.
Once the land was clear, Jumbo security guards were stationed there to patrol and prevent reoccupation.
And you know, I looked at it, there's no money in building. The money is to plant. I'm sure you were told that I used to own plant. Then guess what? With the money that I was making in building the wall, you know what I did? I took that money. I started buying a truck. 1 truck, 2 trucks, and I still went again to GCP. Don't bring Rinoko here. Why you bring Rinoko? We are here, GCP. Use my trucks.
In what's plant? Like,
okay.
Yeah.
You know, plant is machinery.
Oh, okay.
Machinery.
Okay.
You see these TLBs?
Okay.
It's kind of like unders.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
meter souls.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So that's how then I made my money. Because I was building.
So then you then gave JCP equipment to use as well.
Thank you. He will tell you. He was using my equipment. So I'd make money from the wall and from the equipment.
The proximity of Steyn City to poor areas such as Deep Sloot, where residents did not even have electricity or running water, did draw criticism to the estate. A Mail and Guardian article described Steyn City's official opening event as canapes and golf in Shackland. As a defense, Giuseppe often pointed out the job creation that the development had brought to the area. I imagine that the little circular on-site economy that Lucky sat at the center of with the Steyn City developers and the locals was, in part, the job creation that Giuseppe Plumari was referring to. Some of the residents of Zeefontein made out as best they could. They got title deeds to their own RDP houses and managed to get jobs on Steyn City's site.
I know Lucky coined a lot of money from the 2 estates. That's a belief that we have, very much so, because as soon as those things happening, you'll see all the luxury cars like a boat and so forth.
But Lucky's relationships with others, like the Ngoma family, soured as they watched his conduct and questioned his motivations.
In terms of promising an RDP house, how do you promise an RDP house? Remember, the RDP house is a government thing. Who promises you RDP? So you're not going to move somebody and allocate you an RDP tomorrow, because it's a long-term process to wait for an RDP. How he was able to be given an RDP? He was the one that was allocating. He was the one who was doing the paperwork. He was the one that who knows that this person needs to go there, this person needs to go there.
Sam says that because the RDP distribution process was not handled properly, some of the most deserving people on Zevenfontein, his family members that had lived on the land for decades, missed out on RDP houses.
They still don't have. They still don't have. Some of the people, they don't have houses. Some are still living in Alexandra. You know?
Some of the people who are originally from
yes.
members of your family.
Yes. My uncle's wife. Now my wife's uncle is still living in Alexandra. He doesn't have any RDP. He also worked with Lucky very close, you know, and on everything that he was doing. So, but there was Luck will promise you something today and turn it out there tomorrow. And when you turn to fight it, then it will be an issue about it. You know, even that's an interesting part, because even the young ones were given RDPs. You go to Cosmos City, one side, most people, as young as they can, they were given RDP houses. You get in one family, 3 people or 4 people got houses on the same area. So they were in a rush to get rid of those people inside Steyn City, so that, you know, when you promise a house, as young as he is, he'll be happy.
Rumors swirled that Lucky had kept some RDP houses for himself, which he then rented out to Zevenfontein occupiers who did not qualify for a home. Others said that just like Nelson Mandela allegedly had, Lucky had also scored a home inside of Steyn City. Because I have seen that Lucky might have some houses himself that he's held on to.
I know that was a huge rumor, but we cannot confirm it, but we know in the lot. There's I think, but most of them, I think, were hired to foreigners, because you know they don't have a leg to stand on.
No, yeah, I see.
So this allegation that people were denied RDPs, the people who say they were there the longest, the ones who are most visiting, foreigners, they stayed off the list. And even that maybe they stayed off the list, they suspect that maybe they stayed off the list that because you kept some of the RDP houses.
Susanna.
Not true.
No, Susanna.
Not true.
The system of Johannesburg wouldn't allow you that.
Yeah.
There's a system in place in this country. You're not allowed to get the RDPs or keep them RDP for what? Now I'm saying that the evidence is that it will stay with the city of Joburg. To say, I benefited the RDPs from the people of Zevenfontein. The system will say who benefited from there. There should be evidence.
You see, do you understand? That's kind of the story,
Okay.
right?
I'm just answering that.
It's the South African story. As a comrade, to be the one who succeeds.
I was never going to be captured by GCP.
But they say you were captured.
No, but ma'am, I'm saying I was never going to be captured. I wouldn't have gone to this fight, to this level. Are you aware of what I fought? I fought for Cosmos City to be there. Are you aware of what I lost a sister in the middle of the fight, of the struggle? Are you aware, ma'am, would I be chosen as the chairperson throughout the years if really I didn't have the interest of the people? Are you aware that I'm the one who founded Deep Street? Are you aware? So it's not that showing that I had the interest of the people. Deep Street is what it is today because of me. Cosmos City is what it is today because of me. And then there's one thing that you can rob other people, you can rob the government. The government, I was working together with the government, with the other comrades in there to work together.
While working on this episode, the made-up word Mandelanomics swam into my mind. This assumed link between political activism and economic gain that has become so normal in South Africa. I call it Mandelanomics because he's the greatest example of the pipeline, from politically active to profitable. With dozens of trusts, his name and his prison number registered as trademarks, Mandela's estate was worth 46 million rand when he died. This consisted mainly of royalties from his books and also from his trademarks, including his hand imprint and the 4664 brand. Products that generate a profit under Nelson Mandela's trademarks include clothing, shoes, accessories, wines, hotels, amongst other things. Also Mandelanomics, the cushy ministerial positions awarded to those who navigate their political careers successfully, the perks that come with it, both from the job itself, cars, houses, travel, and from other powerful, wealthy people, for instance, in the private sector, who want to curry favor. Remember Peter, who called into Iman Rapeti's show about Gokongoma's story? Listen to the rest of his call.
Everything in South Africa is so unlawful. So unlawful. It's so, sometimes you sit down and you think, do these politicians really love South Africa? Especially those who say they come from exile. I think they've got agenda. They came wherever they were, those people. They were coming here with agenda. But one day we'll discover what is the agenda of these politicians.
Peter,
when they were sitting alone in exile, they knew exactly what they were going to do with this country.
He's talking to a distrust and a betrayal that so many South Africans live with, having watched a black political elite conspire with a white economic elite at their expense. To me, Lucky's indignation as he tries to explain what a large role he played on Zeebefontein and everything that he was able to do, everything he sacrificed and lost for the people, suggested to me that I needed to recognize that he had earned every cent of the money that he made there. You see, under Mandelanomics, what the whites have is stolen, what the black elite have is earned, and what the poor want is undeserved. One's history as a freedom fighter, as justification for one's wealth today, is a very normal South African story. Politics is seen and accepted as an avenue to wealth. The project of economic empowerment and restoration in South Africa has been skewed towards enriching individuals rather than wide-scale redistribution. And so many of the individuals who gain access to this wealth do so by positioning themselves as representatives of the interests of the masses. By early 2010, the last residents of the informal settlement on Zeebefontein had been relocated, and from her house down at the bottom of the property on the edge of the river, Gokongoma watched on. It had been 14 years since she'd received her first eviction notice from Giuseppe, and now she was next. Her appeals exhausted, a date had been set for her removal. Things had not gone well for the Ngomas. They hadn't managed to reach a settlement with Giuseppe, and there was no alternative accommodation provided for Gogo. While they blamed Lucky for this breakdown, according to Lucky, it was the greed of Amandebele, Gogo Ngoma's children specifically, that sealed her fate in the end.
Why ngamthengelanga?
These same kids, sometimes, and these guys are taxis and whatnot. So I don't want to get involved because they want to get their own lawyers now. And they go like your client. Let's go Messi there. Put out like your client. Go get their own lawyers, they start fighting GCP. You think? That's why they think good Messi. GCP went to court. But then I think the glitch came whereby they were looking for an exorbitant amount of money. And Ukoko was a permanent million in shame, I've tried my level best for 7 years.
On the day Gokongoma was removed from her home, a crowd gathered on Zeebefontein to protest against her eviction.
I remember when we first marching to stop them moving Gokongoma after they evicted her out. Lucky was flying, I think, with Giuseppe with a chopper on top. That means they were untouchable. On the middle of that fighting, suddenly you become aligned to the people that we were accusing.
A newspaper article at the time described Gokongoma as sitting on the side of the road, sifting through a pile of her belongings that had been discarded there. Broken photo frames, overturned lounge suite cabinets, pots. The paper quoted Giuseppe Plumari as saying that he'd never wanted to resort to the sort of, quote, hard eviction that took place, but that the process had taken so long because his company had bent over backwards to accommodate everyone from the community. The CEO of Steyn City said that he had tried to suggest alternative residence in an RDP house in Cosmos City, but that a couple of people were, quote, digging in their heels because they didn't want to move. There had been countless court cases, he said. They'd lost every one, and he didn't know what they expected, but they refused point blank to move. That's why he'd had no choice but to revive the 1996 eviction order.
All I know is Gogo was evicted.
But you were there the day she was evicted.
No, I was Cesanel. I was doing security.
Buhamba no GCP, yeah, and the helicopter.
Cesanel, I was in the area.
Yeah.
And it's a lie that I was in the helicopter. It's a lie. It's a lie.
The Ngoma say that was the last time that she saw most of her furniture and belongings, which was either damaged inside of the house or relocated to somewhere else where she was never able to find it again.
And so then ekugcineni naye ugogo, she was evicted by Jumbo.
No.
Or removed by Jumbo.
We never evicted. I don't believe in putting people in the street.
Because she did live on the street for like 3 months.
Yes. Yes. And I had nothing to do with that. I had nothing to do with it. I tried, sis.
As a final protest against what was happening, Gogo Ngoma stayed and lived on the side of William Nicol Road for 2 months, sleeping out in the elements.
Why they don't just buy Gogo a decent house somewhere? Because they can afford it. Why they just take Gogo Ngoma, just dumping it out of the street, on the way to Dipsloot? He said to him, Gogo is not going to, nobody will touch you here. And then until at the last point, he moved Gogo Ngoma. Why? I think they saw that they're not going to win this. They saw that they're not going to win this. But the only thing that they need to do, they needed to get somebody inside the families to be able to say, to be able to get somebody inside, the key person in the families, that they can do and use it on their side. So, but I think that's what happened.
That was lucky.
Yeah, obviously it was lucky. Because at the end of the day, while Lucky was given the contract to build a Steyn City one, something changed hands. I don't know, give me this, get rid of this Gogo, because at the same time, and then immediately, and then the wall was there. The wall was actually being built before Gogo was moved.
And now she has no house.
No. To show this like it was really meant as a business, because he went around the entire area trying to find out where his graves are. When there's a developer there, I'll help you to move these graves and so forth, to 4 ways. It was a business. It was not a single occasion of Steyn City and Dainville. It was, he went as far as that side. He went as far as Rustenburg, if you recall.
I did deals with Steyn City. I did deals with not Dainville. I never did deals with Dainville. I did deals with Lanzeria, Raypex, Toby Ray. I did deals with him in the building construction and security. I was doing security in Steyn City since the beginning. And the city of Joburg.
What for you is so painful? I can see you're so emotional.
Yeah, Elsa said, for me, Elsa said I could live wherever that I'm living right now. I'm living comfortably. I've got my assets. But for those people right at the back there, when I could still recall now, my cousin is possibly almost about 47. He just got his RDP recently, I think last week, for so many years. And some they still don't have. And like hence I said, they like the Ngomas, they will never achieve anything. They're too old to start again. That's what else they can do. Nothing. Some have passed on. Whoever that they're remaining, they are hopeless. That's the thing. It's a thing about like very difficult, untouchable.
On the 20th of March 2010, about 2 months after Gogo's home on River Glen was demolished, independent media reported that she and her sister-in-law, a 72-year-old long-time occupier of Zevenfontein, were now renting a room in Diepsloot for 500 rand each.
It was like untouchable because of the assets that they have. To be a first millionaire in Diepsloot and so forth. So that was a reason behind it. It wasn't inspiring to us to have one of those guys that that they millionaires. Obviously, it's achievable. But how you achieve it, when you look at it, it becomes questionable. So that's a thing.
I sent Giuseppe Plumari an email offering him the right of reply to every allegation made in this episode. I also asked him questions about what he remembers about everything that happened with Gogo Ngoma. His assistant emailed me back saying that he is on leave until the new year. Giuseppe is now deputy chair of the board of Steyn City, and the newly appointed CEO, Stephen Lowe, was also not available to respond to my questions. If this changes, I'll update.
A lot of people have died, especially the Ngoma side.
Sam Sithole and I are sitting in his car, parked at an engine garage in the suburb of Waterfall, on the 18th of April, 2023, the 5-year anniversary of those graves were our title deeds.
So I remember when COVID was just starting, I spoke to Ubabamposo Ngoma. And then he got sick that year, 2020. The two brothers.
Yes.
Last time I had spoken to Babamposo Spielman Ngoma, it was March 2020, and South Africa was on the eve of going into a hard lockdown. I felt antsy and helpless, and I'd also been watching a lot of news footage from places like Italy and New York City, and was really nervous for the old people in my life, like my parents and Bub Spielman. So I called them. When Bub Spielman answered, he was in good spirits. And I tried my best to warn him to take social distancing seriously. I don't remember how the conversation ended. I wish I did. But towards the end of the year, I remember when the weather was warming up and we were emerging from isolation, I got a call from Jacob telling me that Bub Spielman and his brother Daniel had both been admitted to the hospital with COVID, and neither of them had made it home. Bub Spielman was buried at the Fourways Memorial Park Cemetery, where the remains from Dainfern were reburied.
How old is Gogo Ngoma? Is she 100 yet? Please invite me when she's 100. I'd love to meet her one day.
Yeah.
Everything I know about Gogo Leti Ngoma, I've been told by some of the men in her life. Sam, Lucky, Bub Spielman. Whenever I asked to meet and interview her, I was told that she just wanted to put everything that had happened behind her, and it would be too upsetting for her to talk about it again.
Definitely.
No, she's in her 90s, I'm sure.
Yeah, 90s, yeah. She was 90s. She was 90s.
That's a lot of history that's there
Yeah,
with
that's
her.
a
I
lot
hope
of
you
history.
guys are finding a way to record it.
And by find a way, I mean get me to do it. Of course, I'll never force a meeting or an interview on Gogo Ngoma, but I'll never stop subtly trying either. Having worked on this investigation for the better part of a year, I made many visits to Diepsloot, where the main Ngoma family home is now.
Bob Spielman and his brother Daniel,
who both passed away, were two of the four uncles who I'd usually find sitting in a circle of plastic chairs in the driveway, waiting for me. I asked after the other two, the Sithole uncles.
They're from my family.
Yes, the
Yes, the
uncles.
one is still in Alexander, still staying in a room in Alexander. And the other one is also she's in Diepsloot. It's got a site in Diepsloot.
They're still there.
Most of them have given up because they don't have the means to fight on.
Given up on seeking justice for the loss of their land and all that it held, including their livestock, homes, and graves. Given up on the idea of being compensated by the multi-billion rand property developers. The 5 years that have gone by since I walked into the lives of Amandebele has added to a much longer timeline of decades and generations of loss. This vantage point that I have on their history makes it so apparent to me how dispossession may be marked by one sudden event like an eviction, but its effects stretch out over time as waves. Waves of erosion that take and take and take. Last I spoke with Sam, it had taken their graves. Now, it's coming for their spiritual and cultural heritage. Since the final remaining homestead on Zevenfontein was demolished 13 years ago, Amandebele have struggled to find places to perform their cultural practices.
You know, I don't know how they could get the right so that they could be able to perform our traditional ceremony. They would want to try and engage the government, at least to offer them a site where we could perform our traditional ceremonies. But it was still an ongoing process. So, it's still too long. And hence I said, a lot of people are dying. And now it becomes like we possibly the last generation. So now the new generation will kick in. They won't even care. They don't know nothing about it and so forth.
Sam is talking about traditional rites of passage that the Ndebeles celebrate, like coming-of-age ceremonies for adolescents. Like their graves, these rituals embody their connection to the land and must be done on the same soil that they have always done them on.
We call it ingoma for the boys. And then we've got the girls one that they normally do on December time. But ingoma, that's what a group of boys. And you have to do it where we used to do it. But now, we can't. So, hence I said it's difficult.
So is this something that every December, like it comes up every year?
No, for the girls, every December, the one that is matured enough for the family to do that ceremony, they do it for her. But for the boys, it comes possibly twice, once after 2 years. It depends what the king have decided, but that's how far it can go. Every 2 years, sometimes 3 years, but because of the COVID, there were a lot of delays and so forth. So we couldn't do it as we used to do. But at the bottom there used to be a river. And so that's why we used to perform this. But those farms, even the farms, were not even reaching to the river. So it was the outside of the farms. So that's why we used to perform our ceremony.
And now it's apartment buildings.
It's auto in general. There's a lot of developments that went there. The place is becoming so developed so quickly. It's a big issue. It's a big issue. We have to go and back on some of the farms that have been owned by white people. So I remember the last time, I think it was last year or year before last when we performed. So we went far inside that we were not even born there because we just want to perform those ceremonies. We have to go in and beg somebody beg somebody, and then they finally give us something. It's far away from Steyn City because we can't perform where we're supposed to perform. Actually, we used to do it where Auto in General is right now. So it's difficult we used to do it by the rivers and so forth, but inside Steyn City. So hence I say it's very difficult.
Have you asked Steyn City if you can go in?
The problem is that we don't know even who Steyn City is. So we know that I think the original Steyn City has passed on, but the one that is here now, but we know some of the developers that we know back then, and we don't know who's in charge. I do wish sometimes maybe we could meet Steyn City. You understand? So, hence I say it's difficult and the most painful thing.
The people who are in charge at Steyn City are the same people who have always been in charge at Steyn City. And I was surprised that Sam forgot that he had met at least one of them, Giuseppe Plumari and his best friend, Doe Steyn. There are two major landmarks on the Steyn City property, and they both sit on the Yuxke River. On a lower lying part of the river that looks out directly over the former William Nicol Road, now Winnie Mandela Drive, is the headquarters of Auto and General Insurance, one of the multiple insurance companies in a portfolio that has earned Doe Steyn a 500 billion rand net worth today. The location of Auto and General also happens to be exactly where Ngoma's house once stood, the most prominent part of Steyn City that is visible to passers-by. It looks out, taunting Amandebele.
Ah, my God. I don't even drive that side anymore. I play golf. I was invited by an employee at Steyn City. I couldn't go. And that's how bad it is. I used to play in Dainfen, but when Steyn City was built, I stopped going there. Because we had, there were houses. There would be Skosanas there, Sitole with a big family, Mahlangwe there, my grandmother's place. And there were a lot of families.
And now it's apartment buildings,
It's Auto in General. There's a lot of developments that went there.
The other major landmark at Steyn City, Palazzo Steyn, the home that Doe Steyn shares with his family. At 250 million rand, his mansion is the most expensive house in South African history. When I went digging for all the details on what a 250 million rand mansion looks like, I came across this episode of the lifestyle show Top Billing, where Doe's wife, Caroline Steyn, offers the presenter a house tour.
They are.
Eh? What a lovely lifestyle out here. It doesn't feel like we're in Joburg, right?
It doesn't at all, you know, and there's such a feeling of freedom. And very seldom when you go for a walk do you bump into people. So this is quite unusual, having a chat to someone here at Steyn City.
And you know what the best part is you just glance up there and that's what you call home. Can you believe that that's your home?
It's amazing. Right?
Giuseppe appears in one part of the segment.
Making for a world-class and distinctly African golfing experience. What sets it apart from other estate courses is the Palazzo, which Giuseppe Plumari was charged with building.
Giuseppe is CEO of Steyn City and also one of Doe Steyn's best mates. When you got this brief, it must have been quite a lot of pressure to deliver for your friend.
Doe's brief was, I want the best of the best. I want to develop a city like no other. And the theme was really focused on lifestyle. And I think his architecture is at the epicenter of what Steyn City is all about.
Now, having to execute one of the most impressive structures on the continent must have come with its fair share of challenges.
Doe's always been a perfectionist and a great visionary. And I took to the challenge to deliver on that. I mean, if you can imagine when we started, this was a quarry. And look at it today. It shows you what we can do in this country if we just hold hands.
Sam says that amongst Amandebele, there remains lasting divisions and distrust within the community. Suspicions around who worked alongside Lucky and who else may have benefited like him persist.
I tend to distance myself from it because it becomes like we're really after money. Hence, when you start to achieve, they think you might have got something from those people. That's why I try to stay away as much as I can, but I'll give a word or two when in terms of advice or give my opinion. So when people start talking about it, when you start talking about it, they want to know how you're going to crack it. What is your benefit? What's the cash behind this? What's the cash behind this?
So it sounds like there's people don't trust.
They don't trust anymore, yes. That's why I said that I decided to stay away from it. Because once you start achieving and so forth, it would be associated to what have you got.
Still to this day, they think
Yes.
that's something.
Yes. Even myself, that I don't trust anybody. I don't trust anybody. I stay away from it. And when there's gathering, traditional gathering, I normally choose which one can I attend, which one I cannot. That's the way we don't trust each other so much because of what happened at Steyn City.
And what became of Lucky?
No, I don't know. Luck was so powerful that it was very difficult for even to crack that because he's politically connected. I stay away as far as I can from him. At some point, we had an argument whereby ill advising the people. But at the end, it came a truth that he was the one who was ill advising the people.
Is he still powerful? Is he still rich?
I don't know.
You don't know. I see. What do you think is going to happen to these traditions? When you guys, you say you're the last elders.
Yes.
After you, what do you think is going to happen?
Some of them, of the new generation, that they're trying to revive, at least give us a land where we can perform our traditional ceremonies. At least when we go further after Steyn City, after Deep Slot, there's still farms there. Let them allocate a land that is suitable, that's got rivers and so forth, so that we can perform our traditional ceremonies. So it's very difficult because the last time we were in Lanzeria's side. That's far away where we were doing the last ceremony, where we've asked for permission to do them. I don't even think there's political will to be able to assist. Because if somebody tries to help, is looking for, for self-benefit. Like the past incident, people have become wealthy through it, trying to be fighting for the community, but knowing very well that their objective is to get something. And once they get, they mislead the community and say, we want this, we're going to achieve this, we want our land, and we'll get our land and so forth. But when people with big pockets came, then it came the end of it.
After an extensive tour of features such as the library, the grand entrance hall, the pool, all adorned with inlaid marble, hand-painted walls, and crystal chandeliers, the tour of Palazzo Steyn ends in the villa on the property that accommodates 12 guests. Attached to the villa is the couple's marble-floored multi-car parking garage, which Carolyn has repurposed into storage for her philanthropy organization, 67 Blankets. There's literally dozens of luxury vehicles, Rolls Royces, Bentleys, Mercedes, parked amongst piles of blankets, ready to be distributed to the poor in nearby Deep Sloot.
This is 67 Blankets headquarters. These are the blankets that we have from our massive Mandela masterpiece, which you saw at Zonderwater.
Yeah.
Seen from outer space, mind you.
It is
That's
incredible.
amazing. So
Every year, 67 Blankets coordinates a massive donation drive for members of the public to knit and donate blankets. In 2018, inmates at the Zonderwater prison, who Caroline calls her nitwits, knitted and laid out thousands of blankets to display a gigantic portrait of Nelson Mandela's face that was so big it was visible from space.
I call it the Domobile.
They move on from the custom blankets to the custom cars in the rest of the space.
Before you
it was
over.
a garage. My husband likes cars, as you can tell.
So somewhere behind these thousands of blankets are probably another 20
There are
odd
more
cars.
cars down there.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is, I suppose, the most recent. There's only one like this in the world. I call it the Domobile. So it was designed by my husband with the help of Pininfarina in Torino, Italy.
Wow.
So we visited there quite a number of times, and then they made this car.
She shows off a car that was custom made for her husband in Italy.
Yeah, hers.
Are you going to take me for a spin?
It's time, yeah.
Caroline and Jonathan Boynton Lee, the presenter, hop into a Bentley cabriolet and drive off.
Okay, off into the sunset with the blanket lady, the legend herself.
Well, hold on tight, darling.
Let's go.
Carolyn may live in a 7-suite villa and drive a luxurious cabriolet, but her initiative has seen 60,000 people receive homemade blankets. She's a philanthropist and patron of the arts who's found her calling with 67 blankets for Nelson Mandela Day, giving of her time in schools, informal settlements and prisons around the country to help change lives. With a great palazzo comes great responsibility, and the lady of this manor clearly gets that.
What is your dream if things could get sorted out in the situation? What would you like?
Oh, my God. Unfortunately, there's nothing that they can give us back. But I wish, like hence, this younger generation that are trying to revive, if we could get the land that they will offer us, possibly by government, just for us, Ndebelers, to be able to perform our traditional ceremony. Because I remember back then, although I was still young in primary school, when we have ceremonies like that, everybody will come. It would be a huge gathering. So, but now, it's impossible. But I don't know. Hence I said I don't even drive that side because it's so painful. It's so painful. From here, you could go in any area around the area. They will tell you there were Ndebele people living there. There were Ndebele people living here, all around the entire Steyn City, even beyond. So, as far as because my grandmother was living inside Steyn City. My father, he used to live where a Cosmo City is. That's how far Ndebele was spread.
Yeah.
I hope finally sometimes we'll get a closure. I hope so.
Thank you for visiting Golden City. If you liked this episode, like, follow, subscribe on all social media and streaming platforms. If you love this podcast, give us 5 stars. I'd love to feature you on Golden City. To submit your story, go to www.goldencitypodcast.co.za. See you next time.